We are thrilled to be joined now by Bill Hancock, Executive Director of the College Football Playoff. First and foremost, Bill, I know this is a remarkably busy time for you and your staff, so we truly appreciate you taking a few moments.
Well, I'm happy to do it, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you as well. Bill, I know the goal from the start has always been to find the four most deserving teams to be inside the playoff. A couple of folks have asked me lately, what's the difference between most deserving versus best? Is there a difference? Is there a delineation that the committee has to make?
Actually, the term that we were given when the playoff was created was the four best teams. I'm not sure where the most deserving came in somewhere along the way. I think reporters began to talk about it. But in all of our protocols, we are looking for the four best teams. And, I think whoever made up the four deserving would probably have to tell you what they mean by that. We think best is pretty simple. Who are the best four teams based on their full body of work for the entire season?
And that seems to make a lot of sense. Bill, let's talk now about the criteria. Originally, when the criteria was laid out, what was the discussion like about how to prioritize those criteria, especially when it comes to conference championships?
Yeah, good question. And the criteria was laid out as a means of breaking ties. That was laid out when the playoff was created back in the summer of 2012. And when teams are comparable, whenever they're in a cluster together, then the committee applies the tiebreaker, which you've all seen. Everybody in college football talks about those ad nauseum, but at the risk of offending anyone, let me repeat them. Strength of schedule, head-to-head competition, results against common opponents, and conference championships. They are not prioritized. The commission, our management committee, which is made up of the 10 conference commissioners and Jack Swarbrick from Notre Dame, intentionally did not prioritize them. They wanted every committee member to be free to make his or her own decisions and apply whichever ones are most important to each person. But again, I think it's important to remember this gets lost, but those are to be used as a tiebreaker.
So, Bill, how legitimate, in your opinion, is the worry that by leaving the conference champion from the strongest league, Penn State, out of the playoff, and having an at-large team from that same league, Ohio State, in the playoff, that we're going towards devaluing conference championship games? Because I'm sure you've heard that argument over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I've heard that. I don't buy that. I don't think you can make any decisions about an event long-term based on what happens in 1 year. And if you look at what happened this year with the conference championships, certainly Penn State played itself into contention with its performance in conference championships. Washington benefited from the championship. Clemson moved up a spot after a championship game victory. Certainly Temple and Western Michigan and Oklahoma all benefited from being a conference champion. So we don't feel like there's been any devaluing in the conference championships. What happened was that Ohio State proved itself to be unequivocally one of the best four teams.
Bill, one of the other discussions has been about strength of schedule. I'm glad you brought up Washington because they fit into that strength of schedule debate. As you well know, they played a very soft non-conference strength of schedule. And so another argument that we've heard out there is that by including Washington, the committee is encouraging teams to play weaker non-conference opposition. What would your response to that be?
Well, I've heard that too, and I'm a kind of a person who respects all opinions, and so I understand the people who are saying that. Washington, I'll tell you, they were skating on thin ice because of that schedule. If they had played a stronger schedule, the committee's decision would have been easier. But they left themselves with a narrow margin of error because of that schedule. They were able to overcome it by what they did in the conference with a solid victory over a top 10 team in Colorado in the championship game. But they had very, very little margin of error because of the schedule. And, on the other hand, I think look at Ohio State. Would they have been in the playoffs if they hadn't played Oklahoma? Nobody knows for sure, but I know they sure did help their resume with that game. And even last year, back in speaking of Oklahoma, that they made the playoffs, of course. I don't think they would have if they hadn't gone on the road and defeated Tennessee. So scheduling, obviously, it's one of the tie-breaking criteria. Washington was behind in their schedule, but they had enough, just enough in the other areas to overcome it.
Bill Hancock, Executive Director of the College Football Playoff, joining us today on Big Ten Football and Beyond. Bill, always open, honest, and very generous with your time. Truly appreciate you.
Happy to do it. Let's do it again soon.